Oh, hi. Welcome to my house. How y'all doing? So this is it. We're going to try this thing. This is a flipped classroom. I'm going to cover the material that I was going to cover in mini lecture 2, but we didn't have time to get to it yesterday. Very excited and hope this works out great. I'm going to post it on Blackboard, and you guys are going to add some thoughts and some reactions, some questions. But let me jump right in. So the flipped classroom model is a model that is often used in science and math, but lots of classes use it, and I think it's a really good model. Basically, what we would do is we send out a video like this, the teacher does, to the students, teaching them something, direct instruction, right? So here's how we're going to, for example, measure something without using a ruler, all right? And then so the person models it, they explain the ideas behind it, the math behind it, and then the student can watch it at home and watch it over and over again if they need to, can pause, can do different things. Sometimes it's structured in a way that they can ask questions and the teacher can respond in real time while they're home, but we're not doing that part. And then when they come to class, then they jump right into measuring things without using a ruler, just basically using what they learned from the instruction that was sent to them virtually. So that's the flipped classroom model, and we're trying it now. So I'm going to get into the lecture for the second part of yesterday. Just bring it up here. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I am a fast talker. I realize that. I apologize. But you can always have this thing running on half speed, and then I'll talk slower. All right. So we're going to start with slide 20. And this is, again, these are from your, if you go on the Blackboard and you go into your PowerPoint slides, that's in learning materials, it'll be the day 2 PowerPoint. And essentially what I want to talk about, before we talked about what is an effective teacher and what are the indicators of an effective teacher and why teachers are so important and why we value them and what they contribute and what they make, and that was really awesome. And you guys were all fired up and it was great. And then I want to just sort of say that becoming a good teacher takes time, and I want to talk about some of the obstacles to becoming an effective teacher that are especially present in the beginning of a career and rear its head at times at different times throughout one's career. So the 3 major obstacles is the apprenticeship of observation, the stages of concern issue, and bias. I think that those are 3 key things. They're not the only things, but they're 3 major obstacles to being an effective teacher that we need to overcome. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. I'm on slide 21. I tell folks that it takes 5 years to become a teacher. You go through your teacher ed program, you have a great experience, and then you learn some stuff, I hope, and you're out there in the field, and it takes about 5 years for some of the stuff that you learned in teacher education to kind of come to fruition. And really teaching, as Ayers says, is best learned in practice. And I think that that's true. Well, what we can do is we can give you the foundation, we can give you the theory, we can give you the resources, and the reflective capacities and dispositions, we can help develop those. But really it's once you start teaching and you're engaging with students that you learn the most. So the work is a journey. It is a marathon. It is not a sprint, and you have to be patient and you have to be kind to yourself because we want you to sustain long term. There's too many teachers who leave the profession within a couple of years and they never really get their groove, and so they never really find out how great they could have been, and the ones who lose out in the end are the students. So what I will say is the things that you are good at now, and all of you have things that you are going to be able to hang your hat on right away as a teacher. Maybe it's just your bright personality, maybe it's your amazing content knowledge, maybe it's your crazy organizational skills. So you're going to have some stuff to hang your hat on. Do that. That's your confidence starter. That's your starter kit, right? And then you're going to keep adding to that and building up the other parts that you need to build to become an effective teacher. So give yourself those 5 years. The second piece is the apprenticeship of observation model. So this is slide 22. You can see the quote that is there from Lorty. And basically what it states is that and this is again one of the obstacles to real education reform happening, that is genuine reform, and what I like to call educational revolution more so than reform, that teachers bring with them a subconscious 12 years of experience in terms of what classes are supposed to look like, what they're supposed to feel like, how students are supposed to behave, what learning looks like, what teaching looks like, what teachers do. So all of those things are in the back of your mind and deep rooted in your identity as a teacher. And that actually, while it can be a resource in a good way, it can also be problematic because when you go in there with all these kind of new ideas and things you want to try, and we're going to do the human barometer game or whatever it is, and then things start to fall flat, things don't work out the first time, it's very common for teachers who have a lot of idealism and a lot of great exciting ideas that they want to try out with their kids to then fall back on what they experienced in school. And as we know, people who go into teaching, not always, but for the most part, experience school in a way that worked for them. And that's part of why they said, I think I might want to be a teacher. But for too many students, the way schools are run and the way that schools are structured and the way that teachers teach, they're not being served. So that apprenticeship of observation model is a dilemma that you struggle with as a new teacher and really, quite frankly, throughout your career. You have to build that. That's why reflection is so important. You have to have that reflective capacity to say, what I am doing is essentially what I experienced in school. And yes, while it served me, I know from my memory who it did not serve. And I need to then adjust what I'm doing accordingly. Stages of concern. This deals with the fact that in any profession, and especially in teaching, you go through stages of concern in terms of what's the thing keeping you up at night, is the way I like to think about it. What's that question that you can't get out of your head? Where's your focus of concern? And early on, it's going to be on yourself. And that's natural, and that's the way it's supposed to be early on, right? How am I sounding as a teacher? Did I dress right today? Do I know my material? Is my lesson plan good enough? It's very much in your own head. And that's fine because that's where it's supposed to be. But you need to know that at a certain point you're going to move past that stage. The second stage is really about surviving in this work. Second and third year teachers, I think about a lot of them struggle with the sense that their idealistic views about what teaching was going to be just isn't that yet. It doesn't mean it can't be, but that they struggle with that sense that they're what they thought they would achieve isn't happening in the way they hoped. Dealing with administrators, dealing with bureaucracies, dealing with parents, those sorts of things. And that's a stage of concern that you have to go through. You also often will go through a stage of concern about content, of being critical of the work that you're being asked to teach, the materials you're being asked to use, the tests that you have to have students take, the books that you're offered to use. And so that's a struggle as an educator, and you have to find ways to negotiate that. And sometimes you work in a school where you can say, hey, let's balance out, this Hemingway book with something a little bit more modern by a woman author of color. Let's just have some variety, and you'll be in a place that will be supportive of that, or maybe you won't. So you'll have to kind of negotiate that. Some of you might even be in schools where they've got nothing, and you're really on your own, and sometimes that can be a blessing and a curse. So that level of the content area becomes a stage of concern after you kind of get out of your own head all the time and worrying about yourself. And then the next stage is really the stage of concern you want to reach, which is the stage of concern for the students. So that, and when I say that, I mean that you can empathize with how the students are experiencing the ways in which you are teaching, the learning that they're going through, the assessments that they're being asked to do. That level of concern is where you want to get to as a teacher, because at that point, you're really truly present and engaged with your students in the way that you will need to be a highly effective teacher. Okay, and then bias. There's a video here about a Yale study from 2016 that I would ask you to look at and think about. And then you'll see my question here, which is, basically these teachers are observing 4 students at once, a black boy, a black girl, a white boy, and a white girl. They're asked to focus on this, to basically watch all 4 students and to look for them for the potential of misbehavior, right? So they're supposed to watch it and watch for misbehavior. They're wearing eye tracking software, and the study shows that despite the hundreds and hundreds of teachers of all different ethnic backgrounds, the vast majority of them, their gaze was focused on the one black boy because there was an anticipation, and it's an unconscious bias, that the misbehavior was going to come from that particular kid. And so that's really important, and it has a lot of ramifications. But I think it's especially important because these are kindergartners. These are little kids. And you would think that we would see little kids perhaps differently than we might see teenagers who are sometimes bigger than we are, right? So my question is, if this is how bias affects how teachers see small children, what might bias look like when it comes to working with teenagers? All right? And I'd like you to think about that for our discussion next week. And then the big question is, how do we mitigate the effects of bias in our work? And I think that you can't eliminate it altogether, but I do think there's a lot of strategies, and I really want to hear from you. What are the different strategies? What are the different ways that we can mitigate the potential for bias in our classrooms? Okay, that's it. That's the mini lecture, and go ahead and just follow the rest of the directions that are posted in the discussion and on the announcement, and I'll see you guys next week. Have a great weekend.